And welcome. This is CBC Alumni Focus. I am the Alumni Director, Rob Stagenborg, and really honored to have a good friend of mine, Andy Zilch, class of '05. Andy's living the life out in San Diego, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But Andy, welcome back, man. How's it been going?
Hey, it's great. It's been busy, but I appreciate you asking me to do this. First of all, it's a real honor to talk about the beginnings of what got me going in my career.
Well, we're going to talk about that career because right behind you, there's a logo for the San Diego Gulls, and they are the minor league hockey team for the Anaheim Ducks. So you're certainly involved with that system. You've been there for, is it 2 years? Is this your second season, or you just completed your first season?
So this is my third year that I just completed with the Gulls.
Third years. Okay.
A ninth overall in pro hockey. I began, and I can run through it now if you want, or I can talk more about Gulls. But
because you're with Utica, I was going to ask you about the time in Utica too.
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask about the time in Utica because we had a relationship with Utica. You spent some time.
Yeah, so Utica, I spent 2 years there, and prior to coming to San Diego, I spent 2 years everywhere I've been, and I've continued to move up. So I started in the ECHL, and really even before that, I was an intern for the St. Louis Rams for 2 years, and St. Louis Blues for 2 years. I spent time in Massachusetts for 2 years, and time in Utica for 2 years, and then finally getting some sort of roots here in San Diego, and trying to continue to move my way up.
So what's it like? I mean, certainly it's a high profile market, a lot of eyes on your broadcast. I mean, I'm certain you get a lot of support from the big club. What's it like to be in that particular position? 'Cause I think everybody knows, the big clubs and the big names, but when you're working through the system, like how does it all work?
Well, it's been a real pleasure here in San Diego. It's the first time that I've been very close proximity wise to the NHL affiliate. In Utica, we were with Vancouver, which New York to Vancouver, very far away. In Springfield, it was Columbus and Arizona, again, very far away. So here, there's a lot of watchful eyes on us. And like you said, it's a big market. And this is the first time that I've had the luxury of calling televised games. And it's not just, channel 172, it's Fox 5. It's the equivalent to Fox 2 over in St. Louis. And then CW as well. We've had games on there. So it's really high profile here. And the organization in general, both the Ducks and the Gulls, have given me great opportunities. I have a 1 hour weekly radio show here, and I've interviewed guys like Wayne Gretzky. I don't know if you heard of him, but I've talked to Chris Chelios. I've talked to Timu Solani. Doc Emmerich was even on the show. And then we have a bi-weekly TV show that's 30 minutes every week. And just the exposure here of San Diego Gulls hockey it's second to none on like anybody in the minor league hockey.
And was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago, you had a chance to call one of the periods of the Blues game. Was that the champion, the Stanley Cup year, correct?
Yes, yeah, it was. Which I'm still waiting for my ring. You call a period. I always hope I would get one. I'm just
yeah. That was
yes.
the period.
It was in LA, and it was actually the second time that I've called a period for the Blues. So as I spoke earlier, I interned for the St. Louis Blues, and I was working hand in hand with Kelly Chase and Chris Kerber and Bobby Plager. It was great to meet him. I mean, what a legend. We all know that. But Chris Kerber and I, we've kept in contact all throughout my career, ever since I left the Blues with my internship. And when I was in Massachusetts, he gave me a chance to call a game between the Bruins and the Blues. And then most recently, 2 years ago, I was just coming up to say hi to him and, a lot of the staff that travels with the team and some of the beat writers. And I was about 30 minutes out from the arena, and Curbs calls me and he says, "Hey, when you get here, grab some game notes. I'm going to have you do the second period." So within, I think, not even a minute, Tarasenko scores. So it was incredible to be a part of a 3-goal period for the St. Louis Blues that night.
That's great. And, again, one reason why I reached out to you is because certainly I'm just very proud of you because I remember you as that 14-year-old kid coming in here being scared to death and not knowing what's going on. And boy, you really found your ground here at CBC, and you really grew up, and when you got out of here, you were starting on your reporting, you were doing reporting here in school. So talk about that journey from like what CBC did for you. I know you're obviously very proud of your association with the school. What was it like for you?
Yeah, and it's twofold. First of all, my career, I was able to somewhat launch KCBC again in the new school. I remember all the equipment was still being brought in from the old school, and we were still getting kinks figured out tech-wise. And Mr. Murray said, if you want to grab a camera, go to a CBC varsity game, shoot it, do a stand-up or something along those lines, by all means, go do it. So he gave me the free will to go do something like that. And I believe I did 2 or 3 different packages that we played during lunchtime. And that was the start of it. So, I guess you could say that I kickstarted KCBC again at the new school when obviously the old school had quite a presence. And then the second fold that I'm referring to is the maturity that I had and the capability to grow into a man that I am right now. And, you can all start with being clean shaven. Otherwise, you're going to see Mr. Barr. Have a collared shirt. You're going to see Mr. Barr. Belt. You're seeing him. All those rules that you had to learn in order to have great structure in your life. And second to none again. It was a pleasure to come from that school and continue to talk about it because it certainly helped me professionally, but also grew me to move forward in the future just as another person contributing to society.
For me, the school's always been really good at just teaching you how to deal with other people and people from all walks of life and being able to deal with them in a genuine, authentic way. And I think that's why people really like dealing with CBC people because they know what they're going to get. They're always very authentic. So I'm sure in your line of work, just being able to develop relationships is very key because you're not just getting an interview, you're trying to develop a relationship with someone over a period of time. And sometimes you may have to report on things that aren't so positive. So talk about how, that whole thing about developing relationships and what CBC kind of taught you about that.
Yeah, and actually, CBC helped me with my internship with the Blues. So I was, it's actually kind of ironic how it all comes full circle here in this conversation that we're talking about because Bob Ryan was the creator of an internet streaming radio company called Prepcast.com. Yep. And I was working for him calling high school football, high school hockey. And I recall that there was an officer that was wounded and paralyzed. And the Blues and CBC partnered up to host a celebrity softball game for that officer. Yep. And I went to Bob Ryan and I said, hey, I think we should just cover this, have some fun, and, give the due diligence to this officer that was paralyzed. And he was, of course, more than willing to do so. Mm-hmm. So at that time, my relationship with Chris Kerber actually began to groom because he was there. A lot of ex-Blues players were there. Martin Kilcorn was there. So I talked to all of those guys. I started to get relationships with all of them. And from that conversation with Chris Kerber actually grew into my internship for 2 years for the St. Louis Blues. So it's ironic how it all comes full circle and it all begins with CBC.
But, people always say, well, how's Andy Zilch end up becoming the broadcast voice of the Gulls? Well, it's because you develop relationships, and it's like it's not always short-term relationships. It's really like getting to know people and being genuine. I think certainly in your business that is what it's all about. Because if you're not genuine, you get really found out pretty quick. So talk about your own growth path as a journalist. I mean, now you're doing this daily. You've been doing it for years. What's your growth as a journalist, and where else do you want to go with it?
As far as I can go, and that would be doing network television games. And I used to say that'd be on NBC Sports or NBC, but now ESPN's getting some coverage for the NHL next year. Turner Sports is so.
TNT?
I'm sorry.
TNT will be taking it over too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the goal is to get as high as I can and get to the top. I'm not going to settle for anything, and I'm going to keep on moving forward. And the next step for me would be the NHL, and whether it be radio, I'll eventually try to get to television. If that's the next step, then so be it. But just continue to climb that ladder. And I am by no means done. And, you talk to me again in 10 years and I still won't be done until I call this a career. And, I think that's one thing that was a foundation that CBC kind of taught me as well, too, is, just to always strive, not for perfection, because, older that are watching this kind of realize that perfection sometimes is unattainable, but striving to be the best that you can be is one thing that I take away from CBC.
That's great. Do you still keep it in contact? I'm sure in your position, you're going through different arenas and people will pop in and say, hey, Andy, you're from CBC. Do you see people every once in a while in random spots?
Absolutely. And ironically enough, the game that you were mentioning, when I called the game at the Staples Center for the St. Louis Blues that period, knowledge, that was the first ever broadcast and professional sports that had two CBC graduates going side by side with Joey Vitale and myself.
Wow, that's great. And Tony Patrico was there playing the music too. So we had three
Yeah.
graduates. So that's great. That's outstanding. So real quick, we have some people who like to talk hockey. Just the Gulls had some, had some guys come up. We saw Drysdale up here, and certainly Comtois. They've had some really good players. So talk about this whole youth movement and what you're seeing that's going to be coming up to the NHL pretty quick.
Well, that's actually the best part of working minor league hockey is seeing these young players that are coming through. And I mean, more specifically, even for the St. Louis Blues, I saw Vince Dunn play in Chicago and in San Antonio, some of those guys, Clem Costin, I saw him play. So, seeing these guys dominate at the lower level, and then, sometimes they're not dominating. Sometimes they're working out some of those rookie kinks, and seeing them move on, I have nothing to do with their development whatsoever, but seeing them move on, it's almost like a proud papa moment where I was like, yes, I was there when I saw you struggle. You worked through it, whether it was something mentally, physically, and now you're an NHLer. I mean, in all of the organizations that I've been with, there's somebody like that. I mean, there was a guy last year named Thatcher Demko that kind of killed the Blues. So that was a guy who I knew in Utica that was very well, and he's actually a San Diego native. So seeing these players come through, it reminds me of a younger me, powering through some adversity, and everybody goes through it. So it's rewarding to watch this live.
We actually had a really tough year, obviously, just on the ice with, the way that the season ended. But certainly, the loss of Bobby Plager was something that, a lot of people, and certainly if you were working in the offices, you had to have some dealings with Mr. Plager. What are some of your memories of that whole moment? And do you have any personal stories of how he maybe your interactions with him?
Well, with Bobby, it was always small interactions, but even that I'll take. It was always a warm smile and a hard handshake too. He always had those big bear mitts that he would love to grab you. He'd share a small joke with you, and he'd go about his day. He was a very humble man, and for people listening to this, I think I'm telling you something you already know, but it resonates true with everybody that came into interaction with Bobby, and that's why he was such a sweet man. And it's crazy that you say he was a sweet man when you go back and you look at his playing days when he's just obliterating everybody that comes in his direction. But hard-nosed players are sometimes always the most generous off the ice, and that rings so true for number 5.
That's great. Again, Andy, you such a great job. We're so proud of you. You're doing such a great job up there, and certainly we're rooting for you, whatever help we could give you. So you want to tell alumni where we could kind of keep up with you? I know you said you're on Twitter, obviously, but what are some of the shows, some of the podcasts if people want to check out some of your work?
Yeah, so the radio show also is a podcast. It's called SoCal Hockey Talk, and you can basically, if you just Google that, you should be good to go. Our TV show is called Gulls All Access. You can go on YouTube and type in San Diego Gulls. All of that is housed there. My Twitter is Andy_Zilch. Instagram, Andy Zilch. And that's all I got. Broadcasts coming, obviously, when they're live, but right now enjoying the off season after an extremely taxing COVID-19 season that the San Diego Gulls got through unscathed. I think that was very impressive that a group of 35 men were able to come through with this without one positive test.
Well, and I'll tell you what, you should feel very fortunate because in the old days of journalism, it was Rod Sagberg, Fox 5, and now it's Andy Zilch. You can find me on Instagram. Zilch, it's like you have a 20-minute intro. So, yeah, your intro is longer than the actual information you're giving, but that's the new media, man. So, again, Andy, thank you. I want to go ahead and put you on pause, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Any last words for the CBC community?
Just to thank you. This is a cliche thing to say, but I never forget where I come from. But the days at CBC, I spent 2 at the old school, 2 at the new school, and fortunate enough to divide it up evenly too, because they each had great benefits and memories that will last forever, both comical and then also on the learning side of things. So a big thank you to everybody listening in. And, if anybody's considering CBC and watching this, I certainly think that you should put that at the top of your list. It's the best high school, bar none, in St. Louis.
And again, you helped me out. You did some voiceover work for us a few years ago, and we were kind of doing some voiceover. So that was really helpful and really cool. And, again, we're all rooting for you and just appreciate all the hard work that you're putting in, man. So I'm going to put you on pause and then wrap it on up. This is Andy Zilch, class of 05. Check him out with the San Diego Gulls.